Hello and welcome to this research proposal presentation. My name is Luke Lewis and I will be looking at the effects of linear, weekly and daily undulating periodization of resistance training on strength and power of mixed martial arts athletes. Now with this overview, we're going to briefly look at the presentation today, so we're all on the same page. So firstly, I'm going to look at some definitions. Now it might be slightly trivial for some of the definitions that we're going to look at. However, I think it's important that I touch upon some keywords or some phrases that we're going to be using throughout the presentation so that we're all on the same page. Then moving on to the introduction of the topics itself, then some background results on both periodization models and MMA, so mixed martial arts specific research, working down to the purpose and hypothesis, methods, and then finally implications that the study may find, and the limitations. So, onto the definitions. So we have non-periodization. So that is a no set structure of changes in training phases. We have linear periodization, which is going to be the long-term trends of changes in training phases. So we'll look at some diagrams later on, but it's going to be the gradual increase of intensity while the gradual decrease of volume. And then we'll talk about later, but it's mainly looking at to increase one performance or peak at one performance. Then we have daily undulating periodization, which is the altering of the training phases or repetitions from session to session or day to day. We have weekly undulating periodization, altering the training phases or repetitions from week to week. And then we have 1 RM, which is 1 rep max, which is then the maximum weight lifted in one movement. And then we have MMA, which will be said quite a lot, which is mixed martial arts. Okay, so an introduction on MMA. So it has a rich history ranging back to the Greek Olympic Games of 649 BC, and it was in the form of pancration, as we can see at the top of the picture there. Now, it was quite a spectacle, combining various mixed martial arts or various martial arts together, such as Gaelic boxing and wrestling. Now, fast forward to modern times in mainstream sports, mixed martial arts has taken a backward step in terms of mainstream sport, and individual combat sports such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxing and judo are still highly relevant in the Olympic Games. However, it's been brought back into mainstream sport through the Ultimate Fighting Championship, as we can see there, as the UFC. And it's now an exciting and unpredictable sport, which is now the driver of its popularity. Now, with the increase in popularity, obviously, there's going to be an increase in demand for better athletes and better performances. So one way of doing that is obviously the technical and tactical skills, but as well as that, the drivers of the physiological factors that may affect these technical aspects, such as increasing strength and power, which then may affect then technical aspects such as punching power, as well as that increasing the strength and power. The importance, as you can see at the bottom there, of a strength and conditioning coach is for injury prevention. Now, as I said earlier, we're going to look at some diagrams of periodization. So on the left, we have linear periodization. And we can see the intensity in the purple, which is gradually increasing up while volume in the red is gradually decreasing. And as you can see then, it's going to peak at one peak performance. And this concept was designed by Matveev in 1964, who used it for Olympic cycles. So they'd use that over a macro cycle of 4 years to peak for the Olympics. Now, in 1988, Polkwin felt that these were not the linear periodization, was not providing the athletes with an increase or a fluctuation of various stimulations throughout the block. And they believed then that there should be undulating periodization. So as you can see, the intensity and volume increases and decreases throughout a shorter period of time than that would be done in the linear periodization. So just looking at some background results. So we're going to look at both undulating and linear periodization and what's been found. and then look at some of the topics or literature that's been based around specifically MMA athletes. So firstly, we have Hoffman et al. Who looked at linear periodization and non-periodization. So as we said earlier, non-periodization is no set program for changes in training phases, whereas linear periodization will have those. Now, Hoffman indicated that while comparing the two, there was a significant change particularly in the squat, as you can see with the arrows pointing out there. So the squat in particular was significantly increased by using linear periodization, which indicates the importance of linear periodization in a sporting sense. Now, in contrast to that, while using a different type of periodization, which was daily undulating periodization in this case, Brea et al. In 2002 wanted to compare the difference between linear periodization and daily undulating periodization. And what they found was, while looking at weight-trained college athletes, that there was significant gains in both groups, but however, there was more or greater increase in both bench press, as we can see at the bottom there, and leg press in the daily undulating periodization. So therefore, suggesting that daily undulating periodization elicits greater strength gains than linear periodization. Now, that being said, the author did note that during the latest stages of this study, the daily undulating periodization group did report some muscle soreness, and that could be attributed due to the increases in intensity over a shorter period of time when compared to that of the linear periodization. Now, however, we've noted some positives of daily undulating periodization, but however, when looking at athletes in particular, and specifically combat athletes, judo athletes, Francini et al. Looked at the differences between linear periodization and daily undulating periodization, and they found that both protocols or both programs or models increased both bench press and squat. However, they did not find any differences between groups. So ultimately, both are being shown as positives in this study. Additionally, information which was positive for this current proposal was that increased throws and throw success percentage was increased in judo simulated matches, and also there was a significant decrease in skin fold test from pre to post, which indicates that although using effectively or predominantly more strength training, there was a significant decrease in body fat percentage. Now, in terms of comparing linear, weekly, and daily undulating periodization, there's very limited data in that in both untrained and trained. However, Burford et al. 2007 did compare all three models and stated that, or found that all three models did increase strength. However, there's no differences between the groups, and this was performed in untrained subjects. So could this be recreated in an athlete sense, or looking at specifically athletes in linear, weekly, and daily undulating periodization? And that has yet to be looked at. In my understanding, it hasn't been looked at yet. So how can strength potentiate into power? And as we touched upon earlier, it can potentially increase performance. Now, Wilsoff et al. 2004, as you can see here on the left-hand side, this was a study on soccer athletes that looked at the 1 rep max of a squat and the 30-meter sprint, as well as jumping height. Now, as we can see in the top box on the left-hand side, an increase in 1 rep max in the squat did in fact decrease the time, so a faster time of the 30-meter sprint. Additionally, there was a strong correlation between a increased 1 rep max squat and jumping height. So then the potentiation for power and speed from a strength is there to see. That's been backed up also, so strengthened by this study here on the right hand side, by et al. 2015, who looked at Brazilian boxers and found significant correlations between max strength. So max strength of a squat, as you can see at the bottom there, highlighted in the red underlined, did have correlations with various punching powers. So now when we look at some background information on MMA, unfortunately there's a scarcity of literature available for specifically MMA athletes, and the only type of literature that was found was Miraka et al. 2017, a new study that looked at UFC in particular, and just looked at general movement patterns in specific weight categories, and therefore very limited data in terms of MMA and resistance training. And this is due to the infancy of MMA as an individual sport, and typically now what's happening with coaches, they're just adapting literature that's been based on other combat sports such as judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then trying to adapt it and apply it to the athletes within MMA itself. So that leads us to our purpose. Of course, with the scarcity of literature on specifically MMA, and obviously the scarcity on the literature of linear periodization versus weekly versus daily undulating periodization, this brings us to the purpose of to compare the effects of different periodization models in which to improve strength, power and body composition of MMA athletes. Now the aim of this study will be to compare the effects of a 6-week resistance training protocol of linear, weekly and daily undulating periodizations and its effect on anthropometrical strength and lower body measurements. Now, the hypothesis of this study will be that MMA athletes will show greater improvements in both weekly and daily undulating periodization models over linear periodization. And then, however, there will be no significant differences between weekly or daily undulating periodization. The methods will be 15 professional MMA athletes from both UFC and or Bellator. And the inclusion is going to be the age between 18 and 40, actively competing in MMA for at least 3 years. And just to avoid the effects of a previous fight on pre-testing and training protocol, they mustn't have had a fight for at least 6 months. Now, testing protocol, so anthropometrical measurements, the height is going to be measured just only. Then we're going to look at weight on a digital scale, pre and post, body fat percentage pre and post using the bod pod, maximal strength of the back squat and bench press, so using a 1 rep max, and then lower body power using 2 vertical jumps of static and counter jump movement. Now the study is going to be, obviously like we just spoke about, week 1 is going to be those pre-training testings as I mentioned earlier, followed by 6-week training of resistance training, specifically on the groups. So linear periodization, weekly undulating and daily undulating. The groups will be counterbalanced into 3 groups, and then training protocols will be followed depending on the group that they were in. Following the 6 weeks, there's going to be post-training of the body weight, body fat percentage, 1 rep max squat, 1 rep max bench press, and the vertical jumps. So in terms of the training protocol, these are the exercise programs and exercise that were performed, and these are modified from Burford et al. 2007. And as we can see on the table on the left, we have linear at the top, daily undulating in the middle, and weekly at the bottom. Now, as we said, linear is a progressive. So the first 2 weeks will be 3 sets of 8 rep max, and as we can see at the top there, 8 rep max equals to 80%, followed by 3 sets of 6 rep max, which is 85% of the 1 rep max, and then weeks 5 to 6 is 3 sets of 4 rep max. Now, when we look at the daily undulating, it's going to undulate day to day, and then the weekly is going to undulate week to week. And on the right-hand side, we can see then the exercises that were performed. So bench press, leg press, and then additional exercises that are also on the left-hand side there. so seated row, preacher curls and incline sit-ups. The statistics, so repeated measure NOVA is 3 groups times a 2 time point. Prior to the analysis is a one-way NOVA, so squat 1 rep max, bench 1 rep max, vertical jump of the 2 jumps, and the effect size and significance will be P no greater than 0.05. Apologies. Now the limitations and practical implications. So the limitations will be the lifestyle choices of the actual subjects. Now the study can control what happens in the lab in terms of training sessions and the testing. However, outside of the lab, diet, sleep and rest will not be controlled. As well as that, the subjects will continue to train the technical and tactical aspects of their fights. So energy demands and expenditures within those sessions will not be able to be controlled also. Now, in terms of practical implications of these, the study will provide information for strength and conditioning coaches with practical information in which to apply and improve performance programming. Now that brings the end of my research proposal. I thank you very much for listening and goodbye.